Hi, everyone. My name is Suzanne Hume, and I am the Educational Director of cleanearthforkids.org. I would like to introduce Janice.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. My name is Janice, and I'm on Team 4, #WaterIsLife. We have good news and ideas to share and actions we can take to make a difference. If you are a student watching this, you can earn community service by taking notes, creating infographics or creating art, creating music, video clips, poetry, and more things about what you've learned. More information can be found on cleanearthforkids.org. At Clean Earth for Kids, we have 6 teams, and social, racial, climate, and environmental justice are a part of all of what we do. If you go to our contest page at cleanearthforkids.org, you'll see a variety of contests like art, music, writing, poetry, dance, STEM projects, infographics, presentations, and more. We have many K-12 contests and challenges for everyone to take part in. If you'd like to write poetry, we have a contest for you. You can write poems about our air, water, land, health, animals, and our forests. We also have a contest called These Are the Hands that recognizes and honors people who are working to make life better for others. Everyone is encouraged to participate in this contest and honor someone making a positive difference, whether it's in your school, community, city, state, or in our world. You are welcome to draw and decorate a picture of a hand with symbols, words, and pictures to honor the person's work. This week, we would like to honor and recognize Indigenous people for being keepers of the land and protecting our air, water, and land, animals, and biodiversity for future generations. The Native Americans believe that all decisions we make today should result in a healthy, sustainable world for at least 7 generations into the future. They focus on looking far into the future to think about the outcomes and effects of their actions. They value clean air, water, and land, and they call oil pipelines put near their lands a black snake that is doing harm, poisoning their water, air, and harming the future for their people. The land, air, and water are so important to Indigenous people's culture and their lives. They work to protect water, land, and air to keep it pure and safe, to protect it from oil spills and away from harmful chemicals and pesticides so that your grandchildren's grandchildren can have clean air and water and a world with plants, animals, and biodiversity. Thank you. I would like to introduce Catherine.
Thank you, Janice. Hi, my name is Catherine. I am part of Team 2. We aim to conserve public lands, forests, animals, and plants. Protect what you love. You can write about what you love and enter it in our contest. We look forward to hearing from you soon. To protect what we love, we need to take action. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has tried to cut and weaken protections for animals under the Endangered Species Act. The Endangered Species Act. We must protect biodiversity, healthy soils, free of pesticides and toxic chemicals. We must protect the land, water, and air for future generations. We must not drill in the Arctic. The Trump administration has laid out its final plan to sell off the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge for oil and gas drilling before the end of the year. The Native Americans living on this land will lose clean, safe water and land. Also, polar bears in the Arctic refuge have been suffering from the devastation by climate change. We are joining many organizations and individuals working hard to stop drilling for oil, putting leaking pipelines across this sensitive area. The Trump administration knows that if leasing sales are allowed to go through, it will be much harder for any future administrations to stop it. We will put the petition in the chat. Please see our petition in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Let's keep it in the ground. Drilling and fracking harm our air, water, children's health, and climate. Leanna, can you give us some information on the Trump administration's 100 rollbacks?
Yes, Janice, thank you. Tonight we'll be talking and naming each individual rollback. The Trump administration has rolled back or undone hundreds of environmental protections. We've learned about this through the New York Times article and through a Harvard tracker and Columbia tracker. This tracker can be used to see what is going on environmentally, which protections are being rolled back, such as NEPA and MATS, and so much more. And it's important that we look at these resources and we stay aware of what's going on, and we can keep track of these rollbacks and hopefully advocate for them as much as possible to make sure that these don't happen and these environmental protections stay put and are not rolled back. So we'll talk a little bit more about those later and specifically what they entail. And yeah.
Thank you, Leanna. As Leanna said, Trump's 100 rollbacks are very harmful. These cuts of protections harm our air that our children breathe. In fact, asthma is the #1 reason kids miss school, and also one of the main factors that many kids have to go to the hospital. We must protect the air our children breathe and the water they drink. Unfortunately, now with Trump's 100 rollbacks, and big polluters are now allowed to dump even more mercury, lead, arsenic, benzene, coal ash, black soot, and toxic chemicals into our air and water. We need regulation and rules to keep us safe, but the Trump administration put a former coal lobbyist and the head of the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, who is supposed to protect our public lands, in charge of the Interior Department. We need NEPA, or National Environmental Policy Act, and the environmental review process. The foundational laws and rules that were put in place to protect Americans for decades are being cut or rolled back or severely weakened. Without NEPA and environmental reviews and regulations, factories, petrochemical companies, and power plants can be built in your neighborhood, and projects can pass through without proper checks. Buffer zones or required areas of protections and safety requirements are cut, and others continue to be pushed by the Trump administration. The regulation for mandatory braking systems for trains has been rolled back, and now the Trump administration proposed that is allowed explosive liquid natural gas to be transported. And if that weren't enough, a neurotoxic pesticide has been brought back after a $1 million donation from Dow Chemical. The Trump administration has brought back a neurotoxic pesticide called chlorpyrifos that harms the brains of our children, our workers, and the public as it drifts through the air. Sadly, Trump put, as I said, a former coal lobbyist, Andrew Wheeler, in charge of the Environmental Protection Agency. As Catherine and others have said, it is not right to drill in the Arctic or native lands or threaten the economics of coastal cities. Oil spills decimate wildlife and tourism jobs. The health of our workers, family, children, and seniors should not be for sale. The safety of America's waters, air, and land are at risk because of these 100 rollbacks by the Trump administration. Why are these polluting projects allowed? I would like to introduce Courtney.
Thank you. So I'm Courtney, and I'm team 3. So air pollution and diabetes have a strong relationship. In fact, based on recent research that I have done, I've discovered that there is a correlation between air pollution and diabetes amongst expectant mothers and their babies. Diabetes in pregnant women affects 0.6 to 15% of pregnancies globally. It is known to have long-term health effects later in life for both mother and baby. In previous studies, there has been an association between greenness and diabetes amongst pregnant women. It was discovered that pregnant women who live in lower socioeconomic communities had displayed an increased risk for developing diabetes, while on the other hand, communities that were greener and environmentally friendly were associated with lower risk to developing diabetes during pregnancy. Ultimately, the probability of developing diabetes decreased when pregnant women were exposed to green communities. Ambient air pollution is one of the most important environmental threats in the world. Prenatal exposure to ambient air pollution has been associated with many adverse birth effects, such as birth weight. A mother's blood glucose is affected by demographic characteristics and environmental pollution. This is important to fetal development. A recent 4-year study that I had came upon showed that correlation between high maternal blood glucose and increased birth weight followed by ambient air pollution. Several studies have shown that air pollution has an effect on birth weight throughout direct and indirect pathways. So overall, once an expecting mother inhales ambient air pollution, it has an indirect effect on her sugar levels, which in turn has a direct effect on the baby's development, more specifically the birth weight. And so I want to present Janice to you guys.
Thank you, Courtney. We need to protect clean air, water, and lands for our children and future generations. I'm going to be giving you guys a little bit of information about Standing Rock and the Dakota Access Pipeline, or DAPL for short. It is a 1,172 mile long underground oil pipeline that is located in the United States, going through North Dakota, South Dakota, and Iowa, ending around an oil terminal near Patoka, Illinois. In the early stages of planning, the pipeline was planned to go through Bismarck, North Dakota, but the Army Corps of Engineers evaluated that Bismarck's route was not a valuable and available option for many reasons. The plan was quickly abandoned, but then they chose to go through the Sioux tribe, even though they had corresponding problems with the pipeline being near their water sources. There's a DAPL virtual public scope meeting that that's happening Friday, October 16th, 2020 at 4 p.m. I'll be sending it into the chat, and also you can send comments to an email, nwopleis@usace.army.mil. Comments can be left by voicemail at 402-995-2036. This means that because of NEA, the National Environmental Policy Act that we talked about earlier, there is a public meeting because an oil company wants to allow 2 times the amount of oil to go through the Dakota Access Pipeline. Pipeline leaks and oil spills have already occurred, and they will continue to occur. As you will remember, we tried to stop this terrible pipeline from going in and poisoning the only water source for the Standing Rock tribe, or the Sioux tribe. These people are fighting to protect their water. President Obama stopped the pipeline, but Trump allowed the pipeline to be built. The Standing Rock Sioux are Native Americans who were joined by veterans, nurses, teachers, and Indian tribes and indigenous people from all over the world. Thank you to the Native Americans for fighting for clean water, clean air, and our clean land. I would like to introduce Jonah.
Hi everyone, I'm Jonah, and as Janice and others said, to protect public health and our children and our future, we have to change what we're doing and put people's health above the profits that we get from questionable environmental practices, things that harm the earth. Clean air and clean water, as they become more and more scarce, will become like the gold of the next century. Last week, John Williams talked about the cost of air pollution and climate change, because when people are sick and then they can't go into their jobs, they can't work, our economy suffers. When our oceans warm and the global temperature increases, severe weather follows that. Things like drought, wildfires, crops drying up, and famine. Um, People are already beginning to migrate northward from South America to North America so that they can feed their families. Um, Climate change causing temperatures to rise and warm air creating storms and wildfires and hurricanes. Uh, Obviously creates a lot of problems because these storms can have a lot of damage. Communities are at risk when toxic chemicals that were stored in their areas spill out into the water due to damage to plants where they were stored in these hurricanes and things like that. So not only do we need to stop climate change and rising temperatures and prevent the storms from happening, we also need to get these toxic chemicals stop them from just sitting and waiting to be released, and rather use natural solutions. The Trump administration's rollbacks harm children's health, adults' health, public health and safety, and our climate and our economy. There's no other way to say it. There's bad for our country and the world as a whole. Organizations like Earth Justice, Sierra Club, the Center for Biological Diversity, NRDC, Clean Water Action, and others must raise and spend huge sums of money fighting the Trump administration in court, just so we can have clean water. They're trying to rewrite the rules to allow polluters to pollute, the Trump administration, that is, and taking credit for the work of other people. They have distracted us by approving a couple of good projects as they dismantle the entire system and structure for the regulation of our air and our water and our land. One of the rollbacks involved was allowing fracking on Indian lands and drilling on Indian lands as well. Trying to drill and frack on our own public lands hurts us and our future generations. If you haven't seen the excellent movie about this called Public Trust, it's on YouTube and we highly recommend it. It's a good way to learn more about this topic. So with that, I'd like to introduce Janice again.
Thank you, Jonah. We are working to support the Indigenous Environmental Network and Native Americans who are trying to protect their water and land. Our water, air, and land become poisoned from fossil fuels. We need to keep it in the ground and divest from fossil fuels and invest in renewable energy projects. Pipelines like Keystone XL, Line 3, and Trans Mountain are disastrous for people and the planet. They are built on Indigenous lands without consent, endangering the safety of Indigenous women and poison nearby communities. We are working to stop funding tar sands. We want banks to end their investment in these destructive projects. Many people and organizations are stepping up to help clean air, clean water, and land, and to overall protect our environment. Stop the Money Pipeline is a coalition of over 130 organizations that are trying to stop the banks from funding pipelines and fossil fuel projects. I'd now like to hand it over to Leanna to talk more about divestment.
Thank you, Janice. We must stop the Keystone XL protect our water. Pipelines leak and oil spills happen all the time, so we have to divest from fossil fuels. That's the larger picture we're looking at here. Actually, October 24th is International Student Divestment Action Day. There's a lot of different actions you can take regarding divestment that we've discussed in the past. We've talked about fossil fuel banking. We've talked about trying to get universities to divest and advocating for university systems, school systems, and so much more. Divestment also just means to take money out of something and invest in something else. So what we like to do is divest from fossil fuels, take money out of fossil fuels, and hopefully invest that money into renewable energy sources and companies and organizations that are going to promote the use of renewable energy. So Jonah's going to also let you know a little bit more about actions you can take as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. There's some actions that you can take to stop funding fossil fuels. In the realm of divestment, someone who does invest very highly in fossil fuels is the bank JP Morgan Chase. actually now reading this for the first time, but Chase is my bank, and of course I wouldn't want them investing my money in fossil fuels. So one thing I'm going to do, and you can do as well, is call Chase CEO Jamie Dimon at 212-270-1111, and you can leave them a message or a voicemail saying that you want them to divest. You can also email Chase board members Daniel Pinto, daniel.pinto@jpmorgan.com, or Jim Crown. Those are both board members at JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase is the world's largest funder of fossil fuels, actually. It was announced October 7th that they'll push their clients to follow the Paris Agreement. So that's at least a step in the right direction, but we want them to fully divest. They're still financing coal, tar sands, and other fossil fuel companies. And we have more information there on our website about that. A second action you can take is to tell BlackRock to divest from deforestation and fossil fuels. BlackRock manages $65 trillion, and it's the largest investor in rainforest destruction. It's also the largest investor in new coal plants and coal reserves worldwide. And we have more information about that on our website. And here's Leanna to talk more about actions that you can take.
Thank you, Jonah. So another action that you can take is to ask your city to declare a climate emergency. So you can also make videos, do artwork, and social media posts just to let people know. I think advocating for what you believe in is really important, especially social media is a great platform to do so. But you can also write and send emails and ask your cities and others to join you to declare a climate emergency. I think getting your city involved is a great way to really get more people involved, especially people in power who can try and implement more climate-friendly policies and so forth. I will give you an example of a script we are working on for video that I will read right now. So, we've known about greenhouse gases for centuries. We were told about the threat to our lifestyle decades ago. We've watched our carbon concentrations increase relentlessly. Considering the magnitude of the threat, we've done next to nothing. Now we're battling the disasters that we predicted long ago. These conditions are not temporary. They may last for a millennia, and the science is unequivocal. We'll soon push past the point where we can recover. We have no undo button. There is no time left for complacency. We have a climate emergency. Of course, we can't fix this problem alone. But we can step up to the plate and do our part. And we can address environmental, generational, and social justice issues while making the world a better and healthier place for all. We can inspire other people to do the same. Let's show them what all of us can do and should do, and together we can do this. So let's start now. So let's start by approving a climate emergency declaration. Thank you. So that's just a little example of what you could say when you are advocating for your city to declare a climate emergency. You can also do it other ways, and also, like we said in previous panel discussions, climate action plans and so much more are just upon so many different ways that you can get involved and feel like you have a place in the environmental movement and advocating to just keep our air and water clean and our environment just a wonderful place. So now we are going to start talking about the 100 rollbacks. We are going to start stating them and just giving you a little bit of context as to what each of these rollbacks are, because I think there's more power to shutting them down when you know what they are and you just kind of learn about how crazy some of these rollbacks are and how harmful they are to our environment and the health of us as well. So I'll start off with number 1, which is the first rollback, weakened greenhouse gas standards for cars and trucks. This will cause more greenhouse gases in our environment that are warming our oceans and atmosphere. And the climate crisis is now insane because of greenhouse gases. So this rollback, like the others, hurts our future. There's also rollback number 2, which is about tailpipe emissions. As we've discussed in previous panels, it's similar to number 1, where it increases greenhouse gases as well.
And then there's rollback number 3, MAT, withdraw legal justification limited mercury emissions from coal power plants.
Rollback 4 is where states set their own rule instead of clean power plant rule that cut pollution and saved lives.
Number 5 canceled a requirement for oil and gas companies to report methane emissions. And methane is a very potent, harmful greenhouse gas. It's really harmful to our planet and our climate.
In addition to that, Rollback 6 revised and partially repealed a rule that limited methane emissions on public lands, which included intentional venting and flaring from drilling operations, so now more methane can be released.
Rollback number 7 loosened a rule designed to limit toxic emissions from major industrial polluters. Now, big polluters condemned even more hazardous pollution into our air and our water, and this all goes unchecked. So once the polluter has made progress, they no longer are required to use pollution reduction technology and special filters. So we have to save the lungs and lives of the children and the general public, and this rollback does anything but that.
And then we have rollback 8, which is revised a program designed to safeguard communities from increases in pollution from new power plants to make it easier for facilities to avoid emission regulations. Now, communities do not get the same protection from harmful, deadly pollution. Followed by that is rollback 9, amended rules that govern how refineries monitor pollution in surrounding communities. Without monitoring requirements, no community is safe.
Rollback 10 weakened a rule that was meant to reduce air pollution in our national parks and our wilderness areas. 90% of our national parks have air pollution in them now, and that shortens the distance that you can see by 50 miles. Also, Rollback 11 weakened oversight of some state plans for reducing that air pollution in national parks. So not only did Rollback 10 weaken the rule, but it also weakened the oversight of those rules.
Rollback number 12 weakened air pollution regulations for a handful of plants that burn waste and coal for electricity. So again, we have a lot of toxins going into our air, polluting our air, and also toxins going to nearby water sources as well. Rollback number 13 repealed rules that reduce the leaking and venting of HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons. So these are the things like that you'll find in usually that you could find in like freezer and refrigerators and stuff. These are potent greenhouse gases used, like I mentioned, in large refrigeration and air cooling systems. So these wreck our climate entirely, and rules that reduced the leaking and venting of these were repealed. So it's really harmful.
Rollback number 14 directed government agencies to stop using a calculation, like a math calculation, to determine the social cost of carbon. And this calculation was necessary to estimate the long-term economic benefits of reducing carbon dioxide emissions. So changing that math and no longer using that calculation is just bad policy, because you're not taking climate change seriously and you're ignoring the fact that it can actually help us economically to fight it.
And rollback number 15 withdrew guidance directing federal agencies to include greenhouse gas emissions in environmental rules. So now federal agencies don't have to include greenhouse gas emissions in environmental rules reviews, which makes no sense, because environmental reviews are supposed to figure out how we're going to protect our environment even more, and not including greenhouse gas emissions is just, like Jonah said earlier, bad policy. Rollback number 16 revoked an order that set a goal of cutting the federal government's greenhouse gas emissions by 40% over 10 years. That was a really good goal to set, and now that is no longer set underneath the current administration. Rollback number 17 repealed a requirement that state and regional authorities track tailpipe emissions from vehicles on federal highways. This is similar to rollback 1 and 2. So when we don't track these tailpipe emissions, we're increasing greenhouse gas emissions in our atmosphere. and that's just causing a lot more air pollution and more climate-related instances.
Rollback number 18 stopped summertime ban on gasoline blend of 15% ethanol, which will increase smog. Rollback number 19 changed rules to allow states and the EPA to take longer to develop and approve plans that cut landfill methane emissions.
Rollback number 20 is submitted the notice to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. This process can't be completed until November of this year, but the withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement is bad global environmental policy on behalf of the United States. Rollback number 21 proposed relaxing requirements that companies monitor and repair methane leaks at oil and gas facilities. This means that they don't have to monitor how much methane is leaking from their facilities, and methane is a potent greenhouse gas, contributing again to the warming of our planet and oceans.
Further, Rollback 22 proposed eliminating rules that required new coal power plants to recapture the carbon dioxide emissions that they make. So if this rule goes through, they'll be able to just release all that carbon dioxide.
Furthermore, Rollback number 23 proposed reducing carbon dioxide emission standards for new, modified, and rebuilt power plants. This is an issue as power plants are some of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide, and now they don't have these standards, these set standards anymore.
Rollback 24 would reduce or end fines for power plant startups or shutdowns or emissions that may happen from certain malfunctions in the power plant. So essentially, power plants would no longer have to face the repercussions of not being careful enough with their emissions. Also, oh, Courtney, are you in? Sorry. I think you're on mute, Courtney. There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. So Rollback 25 proposed limiting individuals and communities' challenge of EPA-issued pollution permits.
And Rollback number 26 delayed issuing a rule limiting greenhouse gas emissions from aircrafts as required by law. So this means that there's no longer this rule that would limit greenhouse gases like CO2 and so many more from airplanes and jets and so much more. So that's obviously problematic as well. And Rollback number 27 proposed limiting pesticide buffer zones, which protect farm workers and bystanders from accidental exposure. This is a really important and really terrible one, as we have talked a lot about pesticides and buffer zones on our panel discussions before, and it is a very personal thing to us as well.
Rollback number 28 made significant cuts to 2 national monuments in Utah, allowing mining and drilling. And Rollback number 29 lifted a ban on drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
Rollback 30 canceled water pollution regulations for fracking on federal and Indian lands.
Rollback 31 dropped a proposed rule that would require mines to prove that they could cover the costs of any mining that they did and the pollution as a result of that mining. So they would have to prove before they did any mining that they could pay to clean up the pollution that would inevitably happen later on because of that mining. And Rollback 32 is similar. This rollback withdrew a requirement that owners of oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico, they no longer have to prove that they can cover the costs of removing those rigs once they stop producing oil. So with this rollback, essentially, these owners would just be able to allow these rigs to sit in the middle of the ocean forever and never have to clean them up again.
Rollback 33 moved the permitting process for certain projects that cross international borders, such as oil pipelines, to the Office of the President from the State Department, exempting them from the environmental review.
Rollback number 34 changed how the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission considers the indirect effects of greenhouse gas emissions in environmental reviews of pipelines. So here we're just continuing to see that constant disacknowledgement of how greenhouse gases affect not only our climate, but also us as well.
Rollback 35 revoked an order preserving ocean, coastal, and Great Lakes waters in favor of a policy focused on energy production and economic growth.
Rollback number 36 removed the ban of seismic air guns used for gas and oil exploration in the Atlantic Ocean. So this can kill marine life and disrupt fisheries, and we do not want that at all.
Rollback 37 loosened offshore drilling safety regulations that were implemented after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. These regulations would have included some more testing requirements for blowout prevention systems. But now, due to this rollback, there's a possibility that this decrease in safety regulations could potentially result in another environmental disaster like Deepwater Horizon.
Rollback 38 lifted a freeze on new coal leases on public lands.
Rollback 39 approved construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline less than a mile from Standing Rock Sioux Reservation.
Rollback number 40 proposed that most of America's coastal waters would be opened up to offshore oil and gas and fossil fuel drilling. Luckily, this plan has been delayed by courts.
Rollback number 41 repealed a rule governing royalties for oil, gas, and coal leases on federal lands. So oil companies are cashing in at the public's expense, which is never okay.
Rollback 42 is also about offshore drilling. It proposed revising regulations on offshore oil and gas exploration by floating vessels in the Arctic. These regulations were put in place after an accident that happened where one of these floating oil rigs ran aground on a shelf. And whenever an accident like this happens, there was a high risk of an oil spill, which we know are ecologically disastrous. So now those revisions are no longer in place though, so we could see a similar accident happen again.
Number 43 proposed streamlining the approval process for drilling for oil and gas in national forests. Number 44 proposed opening more land in the Alaska National Petroleum Reserve for oil drilling. Number 45 proposed lifting a policy that banned logging and road construction in Tongass National Forest, Alaska.
Rollback 46 approved the Keystone XL pipeline rejected by President Barack Obama, but a federal judge blocked the project from going forward without adequate environmental review process. Mr. Trump later attempted to sidestep the ruling by suing a presidential permit. Initial construction has started, but the project remains tied up in court.
Rollback 47 weakened the National Environmental Policy Act, one of the country's most significant environmental laws, in order to expedite the approval of public infrastructure projects, such as roads, pipelines, and telecommunications networks. The new rules shorten the time frame for completing environmental studies, they limit the types of projects subject to review, and no longer require federal agencies to account for a project's cumulative effects on the environment, such as climate change.
Rollback number 48 revoked flood standards for federal infrastructure projects that required the government to account for sea level rise and other climate change effects. This means now current infrastructure projects going on don't have to account for any of those and could potentially be disrupted by future climate change effects. Rollback number 49 relaxed the environmental review process for these federal infrastructure projects, meaning that they don't have to be entirely environmentally sound and that they can be harmful and disruptive to the environment.
Rollback number 50 overturned a guidance that was in place that previously had ended U.S. government being able to finance new coal plants overseas, except in very rare circumstances. So now the U.S. government is able to finance new coal plants overseas.
Rollback 51 revoked a directive for federal agencies to minimize impacts on water, wildlife, land, and other natural resources when approving development projects. Rollback 52 revoked an order promoting climate resilience in the northern Bering Sea region of Alaska, which withdrew local waters from oil and gas leasing and established a tribal advisory council to consult on local environmental issues.
Number 53 reversed an update to the Bureau of Land Management's public land use planning process.
Rollback number 54 withdrew an order to consider climate change in the management of natural resources in national parks. Similarly, rollback number 55 restricted most Interior Department environmental studies to 1 year in length and a maximum of 150 pages, citing a need to reduce paperwork.
Number 56 withdrew a number of Interior Department climate change and conservation policies that the agency said could burden the development or utilization of domestically produced energy resources.
Rollback number 57 eliminated the use of a planning system that was designed to minimize the harm from oil and gas activities on sensitive landscapes like wetlands or national parks. And Rollback 58 withdrew policies that were designed to maintain or ideally improve natural resources that were affected by federal projects.
Rollback 59 proposed plans to speed up the environmental review process for Forest Service projects.
Number 60 changed the way the Endangered Species Act is applied, making it more difficult to protect wildlife from long-term threats posed by climate change.
Rollback 61 relaxed environmental protections for salmon and smelt, two types of really important fish in California's Central Valley, in order to free up water for farmers.
Number 62 overturned a ban on the use of lead ammunition and fishing tackle on federal lands. Number 63 overturned a ban on the hunting of predators in Alaskan Wildlife Refuge. Number 64 reversed rule that barred using bait such as grease-soaked donuts to lure and kill grizzly bears, among with other hunting practices that many people consider too extreme on some public lands in Alaska.
Rollback 65 amended regulations on fishing that loosened the restrictions on the harvest or the number of a certain species that you're allowed to bring in. This puts endangered species or species that are threatened at further risk. Also, Rollback 66 removed restrictions on commercial fishing in a protected marine reserve southeast of Cape Cod in Massachusetts. This marine preserve is home to rare corals and a number of other endangered sea animals. The Trump administration has suggested changing the management or size of two other marine protected areas in the Pacific Ocean as well.
Rollback 67 proposed revising limits of the number of endangered marine animals and sea turtles that can be unintentionally killed or injured with sword fishing nets on the West Coast.
Rollback number 68 loosened the fishing restrictions that were intended to reduce the bycatch of Atlantic bluefin tuna, one of the world's most valuable types of fish and most expensive.
Rollback 69 rolled back a roughly 40-year-old interpretation of a policy aimed at protecting migratory birds, potentially running afoul of treaties with Canada and Mexico.
Rollback number 70 overturned a ban on using parts of migratory birds in handicrafts made by Alaskan natives. Rollback number 71 opened 9 million acres of Western land to oil and gas drilling by weakening habitat protections for the sage grouse and an imperial-eyed bird. And Idaho District Court injunction temporarily blocked this measure, but we don't know how long that will stay in place. Rollback number 72 scaled back pollution protections for certain tributaries and wetlands that were regulated under the Clean Water Act under the Obama administration.
Okay. Rollback 73 revoked a rule that prevented coal companies from dumping mining debris into local streams.
Rollback 74 withdrew a proposed rule that was aimed at reducing pollutants, including air pollution, at sewage treatment plants.
Number 75 withdrew a proposed rule requiring groundwater protections for certain uranium mines. Recently, the Trump administration's Nuclear Fuel Working Group proposed opening up 1,500 acres outside of the Grand Canyon to nuclear production.
Rollback 76 attempted to weaken federal rules regarding the disposal and storage of coal ash, which is a harmful ash that is a byproduct of coal production, and it causes any workers working with coal ash tend to get really, really sick. But a court determined that the rules were already insufficient, and so they proposed a new rule that could allow coal ash impoundments of a certain type that was previously deemed unsafe to possibly once again be used.
Rollback 77 proposed a rule exempting certain types of power plants from parts of an EPA rule limiting toxic discharge from power plants into public waterways.
Rollback number 78 weakened a portion of the Clean Water Act to make it easier for federal agencies to issue permits for federal projects over state objections if the projects don't meet local water quality standards, including for pipelines and other fossil fuel facilities.
Rollback 79 proposed extending the lifespan of unlined coal ash holding areas, which can spill their contents because they lack a protective underlay.
Rollback number 80 proposed a regulation that limited the scope of a rule that was put in place in the Obama presidency, under which this previous regulation, companies would have to prove that large deposits of recycled coal ash would not harm the environment, but now they no longer have to prove that.
Rollback 81 proposed a new rule allowing the federal government to issue permits for coal ash waste in Indian country in some states without review if the disposal site is in compliance with federal regulations.
Rollback number 82 proposed doubling the amount of time that's allowed to remove lead pipes from water systems that have high levels of lead in the pipes. We know how harmful lead is. There's no safe level of lead in your drinking water, and yet this rollback allows that lead to remain in people's drinking water.
Rollback 83 rejected a proposed ban on I'm having trouble saying that word, guys.
Chlorpyrifos.
Chlorpyrifos, a pesticide linked to developmental disabilities in children. Rollback 84 narrowed the scope of a 2016 law mandating safety assessments for potentially toxic chemicals like dry cleaning solvents. The EPA said it would focus on direct exposure and exclude indirect exposure, such as from air or water contamination. In November 2019, a court of appeals ruled the agency must widen its scope to consider full exposure risk.
Rollback number 85 reversed a rule that required braking system upgrades for high hazard trains that are hauling flammable liquids like oil and ethanol.
Rollback 86 removed copper filter cake and electronic manufacturing byproduct comprised of heavy metals from the hazardous waste list. And then Rollback 87 ended an occupational safety and health administration program to reduce risk of workers developing the lung disease silicosis, and in February released guidance to include silica in OSHA's National Emphasis Program, a worker safety program.
Rollback number 88 rolled back most of the requirements that were put in place under a 2017 rule that was aimed at improvising safety at sites that use hazardous chemicals. This original rule was instituted after a chemical plant exploded in Texas and released these hazardous chemicals on the surrounding area. And it's a theme that we've seen in a lot of these rollbacks where some accident or environmental catastrophe happens, and then they implement rules, and now the Trump administration has decided to remove those rules.
And Rollback 89 proposed changing safety rules to allow for rail transport of the highly flammable liquefied natural gas. So again, like Jonah said, a lot of these safety rules that have been implemented in the past are now being reversed.
And Rollback 90 announced a review of a rule lowering coal dust limits in mines. The head of the Mine Safety and Health Administration said there were no immediate plans to change the dust limit, but has extended a public commitment period until 2022.
Rollback number 91 repealed a regulation that would have nearly doubled the number of light bulbs subject to energy efficiency standards starting in January of 2020. The Energy Department also blocked the next phase of efficiency standards for general purpose bulbs already subject to regulation. So we see all these bulbs that are supposed to be more eco-friendly, and a lot of that, the efficiency standards set for those are the next phase of what those standards would be, have been blocked by this rollback.
Number 92 changed a 25-year-old policy to allow coastal replenishment projects to use sand from protected ecosystems.
Rollback 93 limited funding of environmental and community development projects through corporate settlements of federal lawsuits.
Rollback number 5 stopped U.S. payments to the Green Climate Fund, a United Nations program to help poorer countries reduce carbon emissions.
Rollback 95 reversed restrictions on the sale of plastic water bottles in national parks that were designed to cut down on litter, despite a Park Service report that said the effort worked.
Rollback 96 proposed limiting the studies used by the EPA for rulemaking to only studies that make data publicly available. This has been criticized widely by scientists, saying it would effectively block the agency from considering landmark research that relies on confidential health data that cannot be released to the public. So we see the limiting of science, once again, another consistency throughout all these rollbacks.
Rollback number 97 proposed changes to the way cost-benefit analysis are conducted under the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act and other environmental statutes that help protect our clean air and water. Rollback number 98 proposed withdrawing efficiency standards for residential furnaces and water heaters. These standards were designed to reduce the energy use of these things and make sure that they're as efficient as possible.
Number 99 created a product category that would allow some dishwashers to be exempt from energy efficiency standards.
And lastly, rollback number 100 initially withdrew and then delayed a proposed rule that would inform car owners about fuel-efficient replacement tires. The Transportation Department has scheduled a new rulemaking notice for 2020. And I just want to say this last note, all 100 of these seem so scary. You know, they take away all these really important regulations that would make us a really clean, more green, more efficient running country. But with this scary stuff in mind, it's important to know that you do have a voice, you do have power to influence these decisions, and just to not only think about the bad and think about climate anxiety, but, you know, really just try and find a place where you can get involved, whether that's your city, that's your school, and so much more. So.
Thank you, Leanna. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and I hope that everyone stays safe during this time and practice social distancing and self-quarantine if needed to protect yourself and others. However, while you are staying safe and social distancing, you can visit the Cleaner for Kids website and take a look at our 6 teams to find more information that might not have been mentioned on this panel discussion. And while you're at our website, make sure you take a look at the petitions, resources, information, contests, challenges, and community service and internship opportunities. All of our content on cleanerforkids.org is free for everyone to use so that everyone is available to this information. If you missed a webinar, just know we record each one and post them on our YouTube channel, Cleaner for Kids, along with informational videos, so make sure you subscribe to get notifications to stay informed. Also, check out our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where we post, retweet, and inform whenever we can. If you'd like to stay on the call, the current panelists can stay and you can ask questions, or we can be informed by your knowledge. For those hopping off the call, have a great night, and we hope to see you next Thursday.
Thank you, everybody. You're incredible. We went through the 100 rollbacks. That was phenomenal. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you so much for all of your support for these fantastic panelists, our interns and our youth board.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So we will, before we post on YouTube, we will be dropping some additional slides in there in place where we had a few missing. Anyway, excellent job, you guys. Thank you so much. And big shout out when the people that would have loved to have been here didn't have the opportunity. Thank you so much for thinking of us and always giving your all. So as Janice said, I'll stay on for a bit. I'm sure you guys are exhausted, hungry, and need to hop off. But I'm also going to just stay on a little bit because I'm going to rejoin the phone call that's happening right now as we speak to try to protect that pipeline, or protect those people from that horrific pipeline. So we have worked years on this, for years, trying to stop the DAPL, the DAPL pipeline in Standing Rock in North Dakota. So for years. And so we're fighting this pipeline just like we're fighting Keystone XL. We've had some successes with some pipelines just completely shutting down and turning around and leaving. So we're just, we're going to keep up the fight, and you've got the resources there. We'll keep on fighting. And tomorrow from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific time, you are welcome to join and write a comment in the chat or send a letter to help stop the permit for this pipeline. And as Janice said, Mr. Obama, President Obama, former President Obama, stopped this pipeline, but it was brought back by the Trump administration. So these people, these Native Americans, just trying to protect their only water source and the water source for millions of people downstream, were shot by water cannons in freezing temperatures. There were teachers, I wanted to go myself, nurses, people got very injured by rubber bullets shot by the private security company that was guarding the pipeline. And anyway, it was just really horrific. People were put in dog kennels and had numbers marked on their arms. They were just trying to protect the water. So thousands of veterans went up there and camped. It was below freezing temperatures in like little tents. Native Americans from everywhere, indigenous people from all over the world came to join hands and join them in freezing, like I said, freezing temperatures in the middle of winter in North Dakota, trying to help them have water and fight this pipeline. And Trump, of course, as typical of what's been happening, brought this pipeline back, encouraged it to go through. Anyway, these 100 rollbacks are just horrific. But with people like you guys, right? You guys are the future, and the people listening, and the fantastic people and supporters that we have, we know that we can make a difference, because racial justice, social justice, climate justice, environmental justice are what we fight for every day. And we're so very proud to be a part of so many important coalitions, like the Racial Justice Coalition, here, the Equity and Justice Coalition, the Sierra Club, NRDC, North County Climate Change Alliance, so many to think about. Moms Demand Action, Mothers Up Front, San Diego Green New Deal, UCSD Green New Deal. I could just keep on going on and on and on and on. Divest movements of many universities. Super excited Princeton contacted us to ask us to be there and co-sponsor that divestment, that international student divestment on October 24th. So we're making a lot of progress. So thanks guys so much, and sending lots of hugs, and Jonah looks really tired, so I'll let you go right now. Great job you guys. Okay.
Good job, everyone.
Yes, FYI for anyone that's on this call, and if you'd like to volunteer with us, fabulous. But I'm available Friday and this weekend. Let me know if you want to take more of your rollbacks or you need any help or support, because let's get it done and let's get it on social media, and that would be amazing. So just let me know how to help, and I'm ready to do whatever it is. I'm here. We got to get it done. Okay, I love you with all my heart. Okay, amazing.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Good job, everyone.
Bye.
Yes, you-
Bye.
Stay safe.